Aquarius. There are moments that arrive so quietly they're almost overlooked, not the kind of change you notice right away, more like a subtle feeling, as if something gently brushed against you inside and stayed just a little longer than expected. You're still you, the way you listen, the way you show up. And yet, on the other side, someone seems to be feeling something slightly different. They don't say it. Maybe they don't fully understand it either. It's just that something is slowly opening from somewhere deep within them. And what makes it even more interesting, you didn't try to make it happen. Maybe what matters here isn't what you did, but how someone begins to shift just by being around you. If you've ever felt a connection you couldn't quite name, a silence that seemed to carry more meaning than words, then this story might reach you in its own quiet way. Because sometimes what's unfolding isn't happening on the surface, but in that subtle space where feelings are just beginning to move. There are encounters that don't carry any obvious signs, no sense of destiny, nothing big enough to make you stop and think, this is going to matter. Just a very small moment, a passing glance that lingers a little longer than it should. A simple sentence that didn't seem important at the time, yet somehow keeps echoing in your mind, in moments you weren't even trying to remember. And then, everything continues as usual. You walk away. So do they. No promises, no certainty. Just something that doesn't fully disappear. For Aquarius, you don't usually seek connection in the traditional way. You don't need everything to be clear from the beginning. You don't rush to define a feeling the moment it appears. You're used to giving things space, letting them unfold in their own rhythm. And maybe that's exactly what feels different to the person on the other side. Because in a world where people rush to understand, rush to label, rush to conclude, your presence feels like a pause without pressure, without expectations, without asking anyone to become someone else. And sometimes, that kind of stillness is where real feelings begin. They may not notice it right away. They just feel something slightly different, not clear, but enough to catch their attention. Not intense, but enough to stay with them. Like a very gentle wave touching the shore, not striking at first, yet leaving behind a trace that's hard to name. Yes, and the quiet truth is, you didn't try to create any of it. You didn't have to do anything more. No need to stand out. No need to be noticed. Just being yourself, with a quiet kind of sincerity, with a presence that doesn't impose, with a way of allowing things to unfold naturally. Maybe what makes this connection meaningful isn't what's been said, but what hasn't been named yet. And sometimes the things that begin in the softest way are the ones that stay the longest. There's no need to understand it right now. No need to search for a clear meaning. Just notice this. Somewhere, in a very ordinary moment, something gently touched and began to move in its own very quiet way. You don't walk into someone's life with the intention of changing them. You don't carry a plan to make them feel something specific. In fact, you're not even trying to leave an impression. You simply are yourself, a very natural version of you. No extra layers, no adjusting to fit someone else's expectations. You listen, not to respond in a clever way, but to truly understand. You show up, not to prove your worth, but to let the other person feel they don't have to be guarded. And maybe that kind of presence is rarer than you realize. In a world where people are constantly trying to stand out, trying to be noticed, trying to leave a mark as quickly as possible, your presence feels like something entirely different. No pressure, no rush, no need to be something big, just enough. And sometimes that sense of enough is exactly what makes someone stay a little longer. They may not say it, they may not even understand it yet, but somewhere inside, they begin to feel a very subtle shift. Not the kind that turns everything upside down, but something small. Like when a familiar room suddenly feels a little warmer just because someone is there. You don't ask them to open up, yet somehow they feel safer opening up around you. You don't try to create a connection, yet the connection forms on its own. You don't ask deep questions, yet they find themselves wanting to share deeper things, and that doesn't come from effort. It comes from the way you allow things to simply be what they are. With Aquarius, there's something quietly powerful. You don't hold people through control, you hold them through freedom. You don't make them stay by creating pressure, but by not creating any at all. And somehow, that very contradiction begins to shift something inside them. At first, they may not even notice what's happening. They just feel that being around you makes things a little lighter. No need to brace themselves. No need to pretend everything's fine. No need to hide the parts that aren't perfect. And then, over time, they begin to realize that feeling isn't easy to find elsewhere. Not because you did anything extraordinary, but because you didn't try to be anything other than yourself. And sometimes, that quiet effortlessness reaches the deepest places. The places words can't quite touch, the places performance can't enter. In a very natural way, you become part of their emotional experience. Not loud, not clearly defined, but enough to make it impossible for them to go back to exactly how things were before. And maybe what's worth reflecting on isn't what you did, but how, just by being yourself, then you gently opened something in them. A new way of feeling they may have never had the chance to experience before. Not every feeling arrives with a clear name. Some things show up like a very gentle breeze, not strong enough to make someone stop right away, but enough to let them sense that something inside is shifting. And maybe what makes it meaningful isn't the intensity of the feeling, but the quiet way it appears. They can't quite explain what it is. It's not exactly liking, not something they can call care in the usual way. Just a feeling that's hard to ignore, like hearing a melody you've never heard before. You don't know the name of the song, you can't recall every note, and yet somehow, it keeps playing in your mind in the most unexpected moments. With you, Aquarius, the way you enter someone's life rarely creates immediate, obvious reactions. You don't rush anything. You don't try to make emotions feel bigger than they are. You let things find their own shape, and that alone can leave the other person in a very unfamiliar place. They're not used to feelings that arrive without a definition. They're used to clarity, knowing whether they like someone or not, knowing whether to move forward or step back. But this time, it doesn't unfold that way. There's an attention that doesn't come from a clear reason, a sense of care that isn't built on anything obvious. It's just that they start thinking about you a little more than before, not because you did something extraordinary, but because there's something about you that makes them feel different. And that different feeling isn't easy to put into words. It's not loud. It doesn't take over their thoughts all at once, but it's there, like a slow, steady current, moving quietly through small moments. Maybe on an ordinary evening when everything has settled, they suddenly remember something you said, not because the words were important, but because the feeling behind them never really left. Or on a completely normal day, in the middle of routine, a small detail somehow reminds them of you, and they pause and wonder, why? There's no clear answer, only a feeling that's slowly taking shape, as if you've quietly opened a door inside them. A door they never thought they would pay attention to. Not a door to a defined relationship. Not even a door to something clearly labeled as emotion. But a door to a new experience, where they begin to reconsider how they feel, how they connect, and even how they understand themselves. And standing in front of that door, they don't rush to step in. Not because they don't want to, but because they're not sure what's waiting on the other side. There's a bit of hesitation, a bit of caution, as if they're standing between two paths, continuing as they always have, with what feels familiar and easy to understand, or stepping into something that doesn't yet have a name. And maybe what makes this moment meaningful isn't the choice they'll make, but the fact that they've paused long enough to notice that something inside them is no longer the same. With Aquarius, you don't need to push this story forward. You don't need to help them understand it faster. You don't need to make anything clearer, because sometimes the feelings that don't have a name yet are the most genuine ones. And the doors that open quietly, almost without intention, are often the ones that have the power to change someone in the deepest way. All you need to do is remain there, in the most natural way you can. The rest will likely find its own rhythm when everything is truly ready. There are times when the rhythm of a connection slows down in a way that's hard to explain. Messages don't come as often as they used to. Replies feel shorter. Their presence doesn't feel as clear as before. And in moments like that, a familiar thought can quietly appear. Are they pulling away? But maybe. Not every silence means the same thing. For some people, when feelings begin to deepen, even just a little, the natural response isn't to move forward right away. It's to pause, not to step back, but to listen to what's happening inside. Because when something starts to feel real, people tend to become more careful. They don't want to misunderstand it. They don't want to react too quickly. And they don't want to disrupt something they've never quite experienced before. You can often sense it in the smallest pauses. A conversation left unfinished, a question that isn't fully answered, a feeling like something is being held back. Not because they don't care, but maybe they're trying to understand what that care really means. With Aquarius, you tend to see things through a more open lens. You don't always need immediate clarity. You don't need to know exactly where things are going, but that doesn't mean you don't feel the shift. You notice the difference in how they show up, in how they speak, in the way they pause, in places they didn't pause before. And sometimes those small changes make you question things more. But instead of rushing toward an answer, maybe there's something else worth considering. Is this silence hiding something or protecting something? Because there are feelings that, in their early stages, are incredibly delicate, not fragile in the sense of weakness, but in the sense that they haven't fully taken shape yet. If they're pushed too soon, they can fade. If they're named too quickly, they can lose their original truth. And for someone who isn't used to this kind of connection, silence becomes a way to keep things from breaking. They need time. Not to avoid it, but to be sure that what they're feeling is real, not just a passing emotion, not a momentary reaction, but something that can hold steady over time. Meanwhile, you're still here, not rushing forward, but not pulling away either. You hold just enough distance to not interrupt their rhythm while still staying true to yourself. And maybe that's what makes this connection feel different. Not because everything is clear, but because both of you are learning how to exist within the unclear, without rushing to define it. There may be days when everything feels a little more distant, but there are also days when something small, a sentence, a glance, or simply the way they return, reminds you that the distance was never really there. It's just that things are unfolding at a slower pace, an unfamiliar rhythm, but maybe the kind of rhythm that's needed for something truly lasting to take form. And within that slower pace, the one thing you may want to hold on to isn't an answer, but a sense of calm. So you don't misread a silence that's trying to speak to you in its own very quiet way. Not everyone who enters someone's life leaves a mark that's easy to recognize. Some people pass through quickly, enough to become a memory, but not enough to change anything deeper. And then, there are those who don't create many big moments, who don't bring dramatic stories, yet leave behind a feeling that's entirely different. A feeling that's hard to name, but strong enough to make someone pause and see things a little more slowly. Maybe you're not the first person they've met, not the first to catch their attention, not the first to enter their life in a meaningful way. But perhaps you're the first to make them feel everything in a completely different rhythm. No rushing, no pressure from unspoken expectations. No need to move fast just to prove something is real enough. Around you, things don't have to be clear right away. No need to define, no need to explain. And somehow, that opens up a space they've never experienced before. A space where they can feel without being judged, where they can slow down without fearing they'll lose something, where they begin to realize that emotions don't always need to be understood right away. And within that space, something very small begins to happen. They start to see themselves differently, not through analysis, not through explanation, but in a very natural way, like standing in front of still water, and for the first time, seeing their own reflection clearly. Maybe in the past, they were used to fast connections, feelings that came and went at a predictable pace, relationships that could be defined within a short time. But this time, it doesn't unfold that way. No rushing, no pressure to arrive at a clear conclusion. Just a feeling that's slowly deepening in its own quiet time. And in that slowness, they begin to ask themselves, what am I feeling? Why does this feel different? Why doesn't it look like anything I've known before? You don't give them answers. You don't guide them toward a specific direction. You're simply there, with a steady presence, with a sincerity that doesn't need to be displayed. And sometimes, that alone is enough to shift the way someone sees the world. Not in a dramatic way, not something instantly visible, but a subtle movement, happening in the deepest place, like a seed placed at just the right moment. No one knows exactly how it will grow. No one can be certain what it will become. But given the right conditions, light, time, patience, it will find its way to unfold in its own way. And maybe what you bring isn't an answer for them, but an experience, a new way of feeling, a new perspective, a state they've never touched before, an experience that helps them understand. Not every connection needs to be clear, not every emotion needs to move quickly, and not everything meaningful begins with something big. Sometimes everything begins with a presence so gentle, yet deep enough to stay longer than anything else. And if this is happening, then maybe. You arrived at a moment they never thought they were ready to feel. Some things, the more you try to understand them too early, the further away they seem to drift. Not because they're complicated, but because they're not meant to be explained just yet. With connections like this, finding a clear definition isn't always the most important thing. What matters more is how you experience it. You may notice this feeling doesn't resemble anything you've known before. It doesn't arrive in a rush. It doesn't pull you in a clear direction. It simply exists, quietly, like a gentle current moving through you without creating disturbance. And because of that, it can make you want to understand it quickly, to name it, to figure out where it's going. But maybe not everything needs an answer right away. Some experiences only become meaningful when you allow them to unfold without asking too many questions. You don't have to control its pace. You don't have to define your place within it. Just notice this. You're here, and this is happening. And somehow, that's enough. For Aquarius, you're already familiar with not forcing things into fixed shapes. You understand that not everything valuable needs to be named. Not every connection requires a clear definition to exist. And maybe, what makes this journey meaningful isn't what it will become, but how it makes you feel along the way. If you find your mind a little more at ease, if you notice yourself more present in each moment, if you begin to see things with a softer perspective, then perhaps this already holds its own meaning. There's nothing you need to hold on to. Nothing you need to grip tightly, because what truly belongs doesn't leave just because you didn't try to keep it. And what isn't meant to stay doesn't disappear simply because you let go too soon. Everything has its own way of unfolding, quietly, naturally, without force. All you need to do is continue being yourself, with a calm that runs deep, and a quiet trust that what is meant for you will never need to be fought for. Maybe this story doesn't offer a clear answer, but sometimes the stories without conclusions are the ones that stay with us the longest. If you find yourself in a connection that can't quite be named, then maybe what matters isn't what it will become, but what it's helping you understand about yourself. And perhaps, within all this uncertainty, you're slowly touching a version of yourself that feels more real than anything before. If you're still here, listening to these final lines, then maybe something in this has gently reached you. And if that's true, you can give yourself a little more time to stay, to listen, and to continue this journey in your own very personal way.